Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Priscilla, and today I'm going to be answering some questions that I often get from friends regarding my experience as I raise my children bilingually. I have three kids, a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2.5-year-old, and I speak to them in Portuguese. My children are exposed to English because we live in the United States. They're also exposed to Spanish because my husband speaks Spanish and my extended family speaks Spanish as well. Primarily, though, I speak to them in Portuguese. I do so as a stay at home mom and also as a homeschooling mom. I try to incorporate Portuguese into our homeschool through literature and even through math. So today I'm going to be answering some of those questions that I often get. So the first question I get is, were you afraid your child would be behind in learning English? So this comes up a lot in conversations with friends who are curious about raising bilingual children. They often wonder if there is any concern when it comes to the child picking up the English language and what that process looks like. And so they often wonder if I have dealt with that fear. Honestly, that is not something that I dealt with to any significant degree. The primary reason why that is not the case for me is because I was actually raised in Brazil until I was 7 years old. So I had no exposure to English until I came to America at the age of 7. And so even though I was born in the United States, I moved to Brazil when I was only 8 months old, and I only spoke Portuguese until the age of 7. And so I think about my own story in acquiring English as a 7-year-old, and that gave me a lot of peace regarding my children's ability to pick up the language. I also think about all the people I know who moved to the United States at an even older age than 7 and picked up English without a problem. And so that was never something that really impacted me when I first decided that I wanted to speak to my children in Portuguese from birth. But I will say that the opposite is true, that because of my experience and my family members' experience, I have known from day one that keeping Portuguese alive in our home would be a challenge because English is everywhere. We go to an English speaking church, we go to friends' homes who only speak English. We are surrounded by English everywhere we go. And so it's actually the opposite. I am often afraid that I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to pass on to my children the language that I grew up with, that I would love for them to know. And so, no, I was never afraid that my children would be behind when it came to learning. English. So the other question I often get is if it was awkward for me to speak to my children in Portuguese only, knowing that my husband did not understand what I said. My husband speaks Spanish and he does understand a little bit of Portuguese, but for the most part, in the very beginning especially, he did not understand a lot of what I said because I tried to speak to my kids, even from birth, as naturally as I could. And expose to them to Portuguese in a very natural way. So the pace in which I spoke, the way that I spoke was very much that of a native speaker. And so because of that, there was a lot that my husband did not understand. And I will say that in the beginning, it was a little bit awkward because up until the point when my son was born, all we spoke in our home was English. And so for suddenly there to be another little human being, and in addition to another human being, I am now singing in Portuguese and talking in Portuguese and reading picture books in Portuguese. Yeah, it was a little bit awkward at first, but it did not last very long at all because it was just a natural part of my interactions with my son. And so I was able to get over that very, very quickly. It also helped that I was a stay at home mom. So part of our day was just me and my son at home. And so that helped quite a bit as well. So another question that does come up, not necessarily from my friends because they know the answer to that, but from strangers, people I meet who hear me speaking Portuguese to my children, and they might come up and ask, whether at the playground or somewhere. But one question that often comes up is, do I speak to my children in Portuguese when I'm around friends who do not understand what we're saying? And so, if we're at a play date or in a different context, we are around people who do not speak Portuguese, do I still speak to my children in Portuguese? And the answer is yes, I do speak to my children in Portuguese even when we are surrounded by folks who do not understand a word that I'm saying. Now, it is a little bit awkward, especially in the beginning, but like everything else, you do grow accustomed to that. And people respond differently. For the most part, everyone that I've had the opportunity to be around and become friends with, they know, they understand. I'll usually explain. Maybe I'm meeting a mom for the first time at a playground and my son starts to move away from me. I'll just turn around and I'll say to him, Daniel, volta aqui. Daniel, come back here. The mom in that moment recognizes, okay, that was a different language. And so I'll take the opportunity right then and there to explain, oh, I'm from Brazil and I speak to my kids in Portuguese. And usually people are they're fine with it. They're not offended by it. They understand. I think most people understand the value of children being exposed to and learning more than one language. And I think for the most part, no one is bothered by it. Another question that I get is, how do you not feel discouraged when you don't see progress or you even see regression in your child's ability to communicate in Portuguese? Well, the honest truth is that I do feel discouraged at times. And it's part of the reason why I wanted to start this channel, to share my journey and to keep bilingualism top of mind for me as a way to motivate myself to not give up and also to encourage other parents who are on this journey as well. It can be very discouraging. You pour a lot into this process. And when you don't see progress, or you see that your child is actually less willing to communicate in the target language, it is natural to feel discouraged. And there are times when I certainly do. I remember when my son was just 4 years old, we decided to put him in a part time preschool. And it was an English environment, English speaking environment. And he was there just, I believe he was there 3 days a week, just for like 3 hours a day. And I kid you not, I pulled him out because he was losing his Portuguese fast. And I was devastated. I felt that months and months of work had just gone down the drain in just a short few weeks, because all of a sudden, my little guy only wanted to speak to me in English. And I was frustrated and so disappointed. And I was kicking myself for deciding to put him in preschool. And lesson learned, right? My second child and my third child, they have not been to preschool at all, because I know how quickly it is for them to be how quickly it is for them to pick up English and get out of the habit of speaking Portuguese. And so, yes, I have times when I do feel discouraged. I have times when I lose my patience with especially my two older ones, because English is just so much more comfortable for them. And at times they really do want to only respond to me in English. And so, yeah, what do I do when I am feeling discouraged? Well, I try to remind myself that my children understand Portuguese very well, and that is a good thing. That even though they are struggling to want to respond in Portuguese, the fact that they understand is already a gift to them. And so I tell myself, okay, if at the end of the day they only understand Portuguese, that is still a win for them. That is still something positive for them. That will still enable them to learn Portuguese as adults if they choose to do so. It means that they will have an easier time learning Spanish later on in life if they choose to do so, because they understand Portuguese. So, whatever um, outcome there is of this experience in their childhood, it is a positive thing. It does not have to be perfect. But of course, I want my children to speak Portuguese, not only understand Portuguese. And so I try to remind myself that this is a long term goal, right? They're not going to pick up these skills overnight. And I recognize that one of the key factors that is missing in their experience at the moment is immersion. Right now, their Portuguese exposure is coming from me and me alone. I know that when we as a family can finally get ourselves to Brazil, where we can spend weeks with family and they're surrounded by people who only speak Portuguese, I know that the fact that they understand, the fact that they have this familiarity with the language will enable them to pick up the language very, very quickly um, when they have that immersion experience. And so I remind myself of that. I also try to remember that this is developmentally appropriate. English is their language. This is how they relate to each other as siblings. This is how they relate to their father for the most part in church. They are surrounded by English, and it's only natural and developmentally appropriate for them to want to speak English because that is the language that they're most comfortable with. It's the language that they have the richest vocabulary in. And right now, speaking Portuguese feels difficult and like it's work because they have to slow down. They have to really pause and think sometimes, depending on the topic of conversation. And so it's very easy for them to speak to me just when it comes to day to day things and routines. But when it comes to those in depth conversations, the things that they want to share, their interests, it becomes very, very hard because their vocabulary is limited. And that brings me to the next um, realization and thought that I have when I do feel discouraged. I remind myself that, hey, there is more you can do here to equip them and help them. So, one of the things that I shared that we really are focusing on at home is to read in Portuguese, to really focus on reading books in Portuguese, because that is the way that they will be exposed to the ideas and to the vocabulary that right now they only have in English. And that lack of vocabulary is limiting their ability to communicate. And so, as a parent who's trying to raise my children bilingually, the burden is on me, right? To do my best and to be more focused in exposing them to the vocabulary that is of interest to them. So both of my boys, they are so interested in insects and animals. So right now, my goal is to get my hands on some good material in Portuguese that allows them to immerse themselves in this world, in this topic of interest of theirs. So yeah, these are the questions that I often get. If you have any other questions that you would like me to answer, please let me know in the comments. I hope that this video was helpful and that I will see you in the next one. Take care.